All right, folks, it's about half past the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today and about 45 minutes to an hour to cover it. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jenny Richards, and I'm on the Tableau Public team. My contact information is on the screen now, and I'll put it up at the end of the session as well in case you have questions that we don't get to. A couple of housekeeping notes. There are a lot of people who are joined into this event, but we have your microphones muted so that we can hear you can actually hear me. If you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat window or the Q&A window. I'm working off of multiple screens, so it takes me a minute to kind of notice that there's a question there, but I'll do my best to answer the questions that come up. Like I said, we have a lot to cover in the hour, and we're going to be doing just a few charts. We're going to create a dashboard, and then we're going to publish everything to Tableau Public. So that's the content for today. If you have any questions at the very end of this session, I'll stay online for a few minutes and try to answer as many questions as I can. Also, if you have questions that are a little bit more specific or you have a project that you need some help with, again, I'll put my contact information back up at the very end of the call as well. And you're welcome to reach out to me or to public@tableau.com and we can give you a hand. So, without further ado, let me go ahead and talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. So this is a visualization that I created with the last class. It is a really simple dashboard that is made up of a map, a line chart, and a quick bar chart. And you can see that each component I've actually published separately so that you can open up each one. And it's line chart, map, map, come on, line chart's a little slow today, bar chart, and then, of course, the dashboard, which I've created right here. So we're going to be creating something like this today. I have this recorded so that if you have any questions, you can go back and listen to the recording later. You're welcome to just send me a message and let me know that you'd like the recording, and I will send you the link. There's also a recorded copy of a previous session of this up on YouTube in the Tableau Public playlist. So that's available for you as well. So for a moment, I want to talk about where this data came from, because a lot of you are probably interested in how did I know where all the bicycle accidents were in Seattle. Um, this came from data.seattle.gov, which is an open data site provided by the city of Seattle. A lot of municipalities will have open data sites. I think there's New York data sites, LA data sites, and all you really need to do when you're searching for open data is put in the city name or the municipality, it could be a county or it could be a state, and then the words open data. And oftentimes you'll find sites that look like this. This one, if I look at the categories, I'm going to go to transportation and show you what it looks like once I'm in this site. This is using, let's see, what is the name of this product? I can't remember. It's using Socrata. So Socrata is a product that a lot of open governments are using to catalog their open data. And so you'll see in this case, it's already pre-filtered because I chose transportation, and it's giving me a whole series of data that they have about transportation. In this case, you can see in the upper right, this one, it happens to be a data set. This one happens to be a chart. If I scroll down a little bit, you'll see this is a filtered view. This is a map. So there's all different kinds of data that's out there available in your open data sites. A lot of them, like I said, are provided by local governments or municipalities. If I do a search here, let's see, what did I call it? Bicycle collisions. Sometimes they use very specific nomenclature. I looked for bike accidents, I couldn't find anything. I looked for bicycle accidents, couldn't find anything, but it seems to like bicycle collisions. So I think that it's, if you've worked with data at all, it's a little bit of garbage in, garbage out. If you don't put good titles and good keywords and other things that will help identify the information, it can be a little bit difficult to find it. So you can see that some of the tags here are around bikes, collisions, PEDs, SDOT, which stands for Seattle Department of Transportation, streets. These are kind of important and may make looking for data either harder or easier. So in this case, I'm just going to show you, once we open this up, what it looks like on this website. This is really pretty typical of the data that you're going to find on open data sites. They look very much like a spreadsheet. In fact, they are a spreadsheet. They just happen to be a spreadsheet that's displayed through a browser. You'll see that every row is one unique bicycle collision. In this particular case, I can tell you that this column that's titled INC key is actually incident key. That's what that stands for, only because I've probably looked at it 100 times. And every number in here is unique, even though it looks like it's got a comma in it. It looks kind of like a strange formatting. This is actually the unique identifier for each accident. And when you're working with open data, sometimes it means you have to look at the columns and try to figure out what the intent of some of that data was. So that first one I identified was incident key. That's a unique identifier. If I scroll over a little bit, you'll see there's this INC date. But then if I go a little bit further to the right, there's also this INC date time. And notice that they look a little bit different in their formatting. Okay, so this is kind of important. Shape is actually, I don't know if I can open, let me see if I can open this up a little bit. This is latitude and longitude. So oftentimes you'll find latitude and longitude combined into one column, which is what you see here, and not necessarily named latitude, longitude, but named something like shape. So that's an important column that we're going to use for the map. Some other things that are in here that are sort of interesting to me. Um, if we look over here, you'll see there's a light condition column. It's what kinds of accidents actually occur, or when, what the light is like when accidents occur, what the location is, and that's really different from latitude and longitude. So latitude and longitude will tell you a specific place on the globe where this accident, in this case, occurred, whereas location is a more sort of natural language description of where the accident occurred. So if I were to explain to my mom that, hey, this accident happened at, let me open this up a little bit so you can see it. If I say this accident happened at 11th Avenue Northwest and Northwest 51st Street, my mother would know where that is. But if I told her it happened at latitude this and longitude that, it'd be really difficult for her to understand. So sometimes you want the location as, or you want the natural language descriptor in addition to your latitude and longitude. It's a good way to translate for your user what they're actually looking at. Some other stuff here is road conditions. This column, which it can't see the header, it says SDOTCOLDESC. It actually stands for Seattle Department of Transportation Collision Description. It's what kind of collision happened. So, for example, motor vehicle struck motor vehicle, front end angle. That's a little bit odd because I thought we were looking at bicycle collisions. Um, That is a little bit strange. Looks like they've revised the data set since the last time I looked at it. So this is actually the descriptor of the different kinds of collisions. And I have a data set pulled already, so you'll see what this looks like in a bit. And then as we kind of keep scrolling to the right, you'll see all different kinds of data about those specific bicycle accidents. About a few months ago, I actually visualized this myself because I wanted to sort of play a little bit. And this is a little different than the one I'm going to show you today, but this is an interactive map. And you'll see that if I hover over one of the dots are actually placed based on latitude and longitude. But you'll see that in the pop-up that appears, there is a more natural language description. That particular accident was at Boren Avenue between Pine and Olive Way. And I have a descriptor in there that says that a car hit the bike as opposed to a bike hit a car. So I've changed some of the language so it's a little bit easier to read. If I gave this to my mother, it would be a lot more effective than giving this to my mother, right? This is the same data as what you saw in that map, but this is a lot harder to look at. It's a lot less clear if there are any trends, what they're seeing, those kinds of things. If my mother looked at this map, she would say very clearly, oh, well, this neighborhood looks pretty safe for bicycles. This one looks really dangerous. That's kind of true, but what this doesn't say, and this is what you have to be kind of aware of when you're working with data, is this happens to be where all the bicycles ride anyway. So this is going to be where the accidents occur anyway. It's sort of an incidental thing. What my mother can't tell from this picture is that this is a really giant hill, and you can kind of see the outlines that show that there is some elevation change in here, but it's a big hill. Bicycles don't ride on that big hill. That's why there's no accidents on that hill. So you have to kind of know enough about what you're visualizing to make good judgment calls about what the analysis is telling you. Otherwise, you can make some pretty big assumptions about what you're seeing. Now, some other things I want to point out in this viz is when I took the weather, road, and light conditions, and this may come as a surprise to many of you, the majority of accidents in Seattle, the majority of bicycle accidents in Seattle happen when it's clear and when it's dry and it's daylight, which people don't have that impression of in Seattle. So those kinds of things are really kind of important data points. This pie chart up here is essentially a map, or rather a filter, that lets me filter and look at the different accidents for different times of the day. All right, so different things happen at, you know, 1 to 2 o'clock than 6 to 7 o'clock. And you may see 6 to 7 o'clock, there's a whole lot of accidents right here, but this is where downtown is. Whereas, later at night, you may see accidents that are spread quite a bit further away from downtown because that's where people live and where they're actually having, where they're riding their bikes. So kind of bear that in mind. All of these charts changed based on the filter that I selected. So you'll notice that those accidents at 10 to 11 o'clock tended to happen in Tuesdays in September, but there were no accidents recorded in Sundays in January or Sundays in February, for example. So those are the kinds of things that you want to look at when you're visualizing your data. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that CSV file right here so that you can actually see how I've cleaned the data a little bit. So this is the same data, or pretty close to the same data that we saw on the Seattle Department of Transportation site. You'll notice that in the red, I have changed the names of the columns because I wanted these to be a little bit easier to find. It's these column names that the city puts in, they don't always make a lot of sense. So I wanted to use column names that were really very easy for me to find. Road conditions, collision description, location, um, and you'll see I have latitude and longitude. I took the column that said shape and I divided it into two separate columns in Excel using the text to columns functionality. So if you want to know a little bit more about that, ask me that separately because that takes just a couple minutes to show off. But that's what I did is I put these in separate columns because that's how Tableau likes to look at them. And this is something that you want to do before you start visualizing is tidy up your data. Make sure you know what you're looking at. Make sure that you understand kind of how things are laid out, that you try to clean your data in a way that it makes sense. You'll see also this incident date, and then this one is the one that used to be called incident date time. These look really different. The data in these two columns They're very, very different. So when we bring these into Tableau, I'll show you what happens with each of these columns so that you can understand why I'm using this one instead of this one. All right. So I'm going to pause for just about 10 seconds and give you guys a chance to ask questions, put anything in the chat window so I can slow down. Is there anything that I've brought up so far that you'd like to know a little bit more about? Anything that I've missed? Nope. All right, we'll keep going then. The first, next thing I want to do is I'm going to shut this down just for good measure. I'm not going to save any changes on that. And I don't really need this up anymore, but I'm going to bring up Tableau. And I am using, in this case, I'm using Tableau Desktop, which means there's a whole series of menu choices that I'm using to connect to servers. I'm bringing this up only so that I can do a little bit different stuff because I have you here in class. But Tableau Public has the same functionality as Tableau Server. It's just that you connect to these series of files at the top as opposed to the servers down here at the bottom. So your options may be a little bit different when you're using Tableau Public, um, but shouldn't be a problem. Now, one question that has come in is, will Tableau be able to read my column names if the text is vertically aligned? Yes, it doesn't have any problems with the formatting of your text in the columns. In fact, if your data in your spreadsheet is the result of a calculation, it's going to pull the result of the calculation, not the calculation itself. Okay? So in order to open the file, I'm just going to click on Excel right here at the top. And I've got bicycle collision data. I'm going to open that up and you'll see that, give it a minute, it's a slightly large data set. It'll open up in this tab, which is essentially your data source tab. This is the place where you go to look at your data once it's brought into Tableau. A couple of pieces to note here. The left side of the screen will show you all of the sheets that are available and all of the connections. So if I wanted to add another data set and join it to my bicycle collision data, this is where I would do that. If I had additional spreadsheets in there, I could drag them into this area and union them, or I could do joins, inner joins, outer joins, all of those types of things I can do right in here. A really important thing for you to do now that you've taken a look at your data in the spreadsheet is to look at the data type that Tableau thinks it sees in your data. And you can look in the upper left corner of each of the columns to see what Tableau says that it thinks it's looking at. So let's take, for example, this incident date and this date time. I have talked about this now. This is the third time I've mentioned this one today. And I bring it up for a reason. Remember I said that I renamed this one and had a red header on it, date time, so it was easier for me to find. Notice that the entries are very different. One says 8 a.m. plus 0000. The other says 8:41 a.m. So when Tableau reads these formats, it looks and it says this column is actually date time. It looks at this column and says, I'm not really sure what to do with this. So I'm going to call it a string. So notice that this is actually recognized as numbers, and distance is actually a number, right? Collision type, this is ABC at the top, which means it recognizes it as a string. And if I scroll all the way over to latitude and longitude, you'll see this little globe icon here. And the globe icon indicates that Tableau is recognizing this as geographic information. All right. So those are kind of some important keys that we're going to look at here. Now, one question I've received on chat is, can I give specific examples of joining data to files of joining data? Sure, I'll give you an example, but I'm not going to walk through it today because it does take a little bit of time. And there's a couple of videos on joining data and cleaning data. One example might be, let's say with this data set, I have this map to latitude and longitude, and I can map latitude and longitude to zip code, right? Because zip code is a postal code. It's an area of within the city, for example, or within the U.S. What I could do is I could marry the collision information with, say, for example, the population density in that area. And those would be two totally separate data sources, one with the bicycle collision data and another one with the census data that would tell us how many people live in a particular zip code. And so you could actually marry those two pieces, those two data sources together, and display in the background your population density and in the foreground your bicycle collisions. That would be an example of how you would join the data to get a more robust analysis, right? If you still have questions at the end of this session and want to learn a little bit more, reach out to me via email and I'll send you some links or some videos that you can watch. So down here at the bottom, the next thing you're going to want to do is go to sheet 1. And what you're looking at is the canvas that you're going to use to build your vizzes. So on the left side are dimensions and measures. And dimensions can be sort of thought of as categorical information. This is information that you can count how many of different things. So how many different light conditions, how many accidents occurred at that were speeding, how many had a certain severity. Whereas measures are oftentimes things that you're doing real calculations against. For example, how far. In the case of the number of fatalities or the number of injuries, I think I said number up here at the top. What I really meant was how many of these conditions were in daytime versus dusk versus nighttime. Whereas this is, I have 3 fatalities and 2 injuries, plus 4 pedestrians that were involved. So it's a slightly different way of looking at the data. Your measures are basically your numbers that you're doing math with. Dimensions are categories. One dimension up here that I want to call out is the incident key. And you'll remember when we were looking at the original data source, the incident key is the unique identifier for each incident. That is not really a measure because even though it's a number, you're not doing math against it. It might as well be, a word or beginning with letters. So that's why that has a number sign in front of it, because it does recognize it as numbers, but it's blue and it shows up in the dimensions section, whereas all the measures are green and they show up in the measures section. All right, I'm going to get right to it then. I'm going to build us a map. So the simplest way to do this is I'm going to double click on latitude and longitude. And then I'm going to take that incident key and I'm going to drag it to detail. And that tells me to map each of the latitude and longitude based on the incident key. I'm also going to take this column description or this collision description and I'm going to drag it to color. Now what you see here, and I'm going to clean it up really quick, are a series of the collision descriptions that appear on this map. There's just way too many colors here to make sense. So essentially what you have are motor vehicles striking bicycles. That's most of those accidents. So I'm going to group these and I'm going to call that, find an alias, edit the alias, and that's car hit bike. Okay. Let's see, all of these are the bike hit the car. So I'm going to group those and then I'm going to edit the alias here. So bike hit car. So you notice that I'm also changing the wording a little bit so it's a little bit easier easier to recognize what we have. So bike hit bike is this one. I'm going to group those. And let's see, this is a name. It's bike hit bike. And then you'll notice now that I've got a lot fewer colors and these are starting to look a little bit better. These are really solo bike, like the bike hit overturn in the road, bike ran off the road, or the bike hit something in the road. So I'm going to group those together and call that solo bike. And then this last one is bike hit pedestrian, which I'm just going to take out. Bike hit pedestrian. Okay. Notice also there's some nulls down here at the bottom. It just says that there's nothing, there's something that's missing. In this case, the longitude axis is missing some data. So I'm just going to right click on that and hide the indicator. Don't really care. And I'm going to come back over to this color and I'm going to edit the colors. And I'm going to make, let's see, the car hit the bike, pretty dramatic. I'm going to put the bike hit the car is also pretty dramatic. Solo bike, I will leave green. The bike hit the pedestrian, I will call it gray. And the bike hit a bike, I will give it a purple color. Actually, let's do that yellow. And okay, now one more color thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to change the opacity a little bit so you can see they're stacked on each other. And I'm going to change the border. All right, so you've got a little bit of a border going here. And as I hover over each of these, you'll see how much density there is right here. This gives me the latitude, the longitude, that incident key that we talked about earlier, and you'll see a map here. I'm also going to change the map, and I'm going to put it as a normal background. So it's just a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. If I wanted to be really dramatic, I could do this, right? I'm also going to change the size just a touch. So that's a really quick and dirty way to do a map. The next thing I'm going to do is rename this map, and I'm going to go to another new sheet, which is right down here at the bottom, lower left, second button or first button, create a new sheet. So next thing I'm going to build is a line chart showing the number of incidents per year. And the first thing I want to do is make the date time, this date time right here, I'm going to make this continuous. So instead of unique entries of the date time, I'm going to change it so it's in a oh gosh, what's the word I want to use? So it's not individual. It's a continuous number. You'll see what this looks like in just a minute. So I'm going to take date time and I'm going to drag it and drop it to columns. All right. And then I'm going to take the number of records, which is down here at the bottom. This is an automatic entry that appears when you bring anything into Tableau. I'm going to take the number of records into the rows. All right. So now I've got, well, okay, this is sort of interesting. I've got these collision descriptions that we used in the other tab. It's the grouped items right here. I'm going to take that and I'm going to drag it onto color. Now you'll see that these descriptions that I edited now show up here. But this is okay. What happens if I click this little plus symbol next to the year? Okay, it drills down to quarter, and maybe I want to do month. So this is looking at, this is 2004 to 2016. So I'm looking at May of 2010, and then I'm looking at August of 2010. So you'll see that this is getting better. I'm going to keep changing these a little bit. And let's see, what if I make the size a little bit narrower? Okay, so that's just a simple line chart. And all I did was drag and dropped it onto the chart. And I'm going to change the title of this to line chart. And I'm going to create one more sheet. All right, I want to show you the Show Me button, which is up here in the upper right. This is a collection of sort of, I don't want to call them templates, but guidelines for different kinds of charts you can use within Tableau. And you'll see as I hover, it tells me how many dimensions and how many measures I need to create that chart. All right, so this is really helpful because sometimes you look at your data and you're like, oh, I totally want a map. But you have to know what kinds of information you're putting on the map in order for it to make sense. For example, if you have some categories of information that are associated with a country, for example, you can put it on a map, but that doesn't mean that the map is important. It's kind of incidental. If you have the latitude and longitude of where those products are made in that country, well, that's different. That's different than saying, 5 of these are are made in Bulgaria, and 3 of this type are made in Bulgaria, and 2 of that type are made in Bulgaria. That's different than this one is made in this city in Bulgaria, and this product is made in that city in Bulgaria. So they're kind of different ways of looking at the data. That's what the Show Me is intended to do, is to help guide you. If you select what kind of data you want to see, it will tell you what the best map is. So I'm going to grab weather conditions and that incident key, and I'm also going to, let's see, notice that it only tells me that there's one thing here that's highlighted. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to grab number of records, because really I want to know how many number of records there are for the different kinds of weather conditions. Notice I even spelled that wrong. And by default, Tableau says, hey, bar chart really works well for this one. And it's going to even highlight it in red and say this particular bar chart, because there's a couple of other bar charts, this one is the one you should use. So if I click it, you'll see automatically, that's not quite what I wanted it to do. So let's see, I'm going to change the incident key right here to do a count. And I'm going to take out that number of records. All right, now you've seen me kind of fall on my face. So let me go back and fix this one more time. I'm going to take weather conditions, and I'm going to take incident key, and I'm going to change that to, it's not working the way that it used to work. Okay, that's all right. I'm going to make, let's see, I need 1 or more measures and dimensions. So I'm going to take the weather conditions and the number of records. We'll do that. That's probably what I wanted to do to begin with. And then I'm going to take the collision descriptions and I'm going to drag it onto color. All right, so you can see that those different collisions that we talked about earlier now show up in the bar chart, but this is kind of sorted really funny, and there's got this null thing right here. I'm going to right click on null and I'm going to choose to exclude it. And it just put that up here in the filters. And then if I go up here to the top, there's an option to sort it top to bottom, bottom to top. So these actually look pretty good, but again, there's this other and unknown, raining and overcast, sleet, hail, and there's not actually any records in here. So that's kind of too bad, but that's all right. You can choose to exclude them if you want. You can choose to combine them, or you can just leave it as is. So I'm going to leave these as is. I'm also going to change the order of these so that the biggest one, which is car hit the bike, is at the front. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a